Hi guys, Bert here again. So very exciting 2026. The first half of 2026 is going to be packed. And we've got several launches likely coming up between the March and April alone. So instead of reacting to every launch one by one, let's zoom out and talk about 3 launches I think will stand out in this current window. But here's the interesting part. This may actually be one of the last windows where buyers are still seeing projects built on earlier land prices. Because if you look at recent land bids, they've already started creeping up again. And once again, those newer bids start filtering into the launches. Pricing benchmarks across markets could actually shift. But that's normal. Because when there's more supply, the question isn't just, is this project good or not? It becomes, is this the best fit compared to everything else that's launching right now? So a quick disclaimer before we get into the picks. These aren't my best projects in general. They're just the ones that will stand out to me based on the positioning in this upcoming launch window. I'm mainly looking at 3 things. How they are going to be priced relative to nearby supply, who the natural buyer pool is, and how they might behave after the initial launch dies down. Because in a busy launch period, the project that gets the most attention at launch isn't always going to be one that ages the best. So with that in mind, let's start with the first one. So the first one on my list is Pinery, and this should be launching somewhere between March and April. So it's likely to be one of the earlier projects in this upcoming wave. And what makes this actually interesting to me is that it's positioned within the Tampines region. And this is already a mature estate and one of Singapore's key regional centers. So you're not actually waiting for the area to develop. It has already everything in place. You've got MRT access just downstairs, Tampines Central not too far away, established malls, schools, and all your day-to-day amenities. And for many East Side upgraders, wow, this becomes a very natural progression move because they don't really want to leave the area. This is already their comfort zone. That existing residential base is actually very important, and projects in mature estates tend to have a built-in pool of buyers who want to stay within the neighborhood. Pricing will be one of the key things to watch here, because based on land cost and estimated break-even, it should sit somewhere between the high 1,800 PSF range. But realistically, developers don't price at break-even nah. They need to make money ma. So another recent launch in Tampines, we have Parktown, averaging around the low to mid 2,300 PSF range. It's reasonable to expect this project to come in somewhere around that zone, possibly even similar or slightly higher. So this probably won't be a cheap entry into Tampines, but for buyers who specifically want this location and a newer project, it could still actually make sense. And this actually ties back to something I mentioned earlier. A lot of these sites were bought before land prices started moving up again. And I'll come back to why that matters later. The next pick will be one of the most highly anticipated, Bayshore. Also expected around the March-April window, this whole stretch is shaping into a new township cluster. And we're already seeing that transformation take place. The MRT is already operational, which is a big deal. Usually when we talk about transformation stories, buyers have to wait X number of years. Here, the infrastructure is already in place. Over time, the area is expected to see a mix of new private condos and upcoming HDB BTOs. So you're looking actually at a new residential pocket which is forming within an already established East Coast location. So this stretch actually hasn't seen many new launches because land supply has been very limited. When this site was sold, the land bid was actually very hotly contested and came in at a relatively high price at that point in time. This signals the strong developer confidence and also the limited supply. Pricing here is likely to reflect the location and the scarcity, and buyers in this area tend to be more location-driven and comfortable with larger homes. If there were sea-facing stacks available, those will likely draw strong interest as well, simply because supply has been limited. You only have that stretch of seafront and limited number of plots available. So Bayshore is more of a location and scarcity driven pick. Not the cheapest in the cycle, but one with a very strong underlying demand. And the last one on my list is the former Thomson View en bloc site. So this one is currently on paper looking like a late Q2 launch, but realistically, I would feel that it could actually slide towards the end of 2026 depending on timing. So it may not be part of the immediate March-April cluster, which probably is good, but it's still one of the more important launches to watch this year. This is a much larger site compared to the other two, and large transformation projects like this tend to attract a very deep upgrader pool from the surrounding areas. We already have established private housing nearby, families living in the district, and many of them eventually looking to upgrade within the same location. So demand here tends to be fairly organic rather than purely investor driven. Pricing will be interesting for this one. On paper, some break-even estimates in the market look fairly reasonable, around the low 2000 PSF range. But this isn't a straightforward GLS site. It was an en bloc site, so additional costs are involved. Things like lease top-up, demolition, and construction. Factors that can push overall development costs actually higher. Because of that, eventual launch price is likely to coming meaningfully higher than simple break-even estimates. Market talk at the moment seems to be pointing somewhere in the high 2000 PSF range, possibly trending towards the 29 to 3000 PSF zone, depending on the positioning of the developer. So this probably won't be a low entry project but for buyers who specifically want this location and larger format development, it may still make sense. With larger developments, internal competition then becomes a factor. You're looking at 1000 over units in the same development, so unit selection and entry price will matter quite a bit. So this is more of a later cycle project to watch rather than an immediate one. So the reason the next 6 months matter isn't because prices are suddenly going to jump overnight. It's more because we are reaching an actual interesting transition point in the market. If you've noticed, over the past few years, we've been in that GFA harmonization phase where earlier land bids were coming at relatively lower prices. Those few launches after harmonization had what you call a bit of a first mover advantage, because developers were still trying to feel the market and how buyers would react to the new rulings. But if you look at the more recent land bids in the second half of the cycle, you'll notice something. Land prices have started to creep up again. In some areas, we are seeing land bids that are about 200 to 400 PSF, higher compared to earlier sites. That suggests the earlier window of more attractively priced land is actually slowly closing. Developers are now bidding at higher levels, and eventually that flows through into launch pricing. So the next 6 months sit in an interesting spot. You still have projects coming out that were bought earlier, before land prices really started pushing up again. But the next wave after that could look quite different. That doesn't mean everything will suddenly become expensive overnight, but it does mean buyers are entering a period where pricing comparisons will start shifting. And when launches cluster together in this kind of a transition phase, the decision becomes less about rushing and more about choosing correctly. Because once the newer, higher land cost projects start coming through, the benchmark for pricing across the board could gradually move up. If you're looking at any of these launches and trying to figure out which one fits your budget or timeline the best, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to run through the numbers and compare options properly with you. So thanks for watching, and do like and subscribe so I can update you again once more launch details start coming out. I help you plan your next move properly, because the right move isn't just about property, it's about planning.